Calling to order the April 4th Planning Commission meeting at 6:35. I'm just trying to bring up the agenda here. Well, first, as always, comments from the public, right? Or scheduled changes. Any changes to the agenda? Thanks. Yeah, I just got it up.
Well, I'd like to add a sub-item to Development Code amendments at the bottom. Something about accessory apartments.
Okay. Sounds good.
We can put that at the bottom of it, I think.
Moving on to the public to be heard. Any comments from the public on items not on the agenda? There's nobody here in person.
Nobody online either.
Okay. Moving on to the minutes from March 7th. I need a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Sorry.
All right. Any discussion on those minutes? Any changes anyone wanted to make?
I don't have any changes, but it sounds like you had a great discussion.
We did. The presentation, the sign presentation was really great.
Yeah, it was a heated discussion.
Well, I haven't watched.
Yeah, I recommend watching it.
I know now from reading the minutes that I will need to watch it because I'm missing parts of the discussion. But once the vote is over on Tuesday, I'll have a little more time.
Any changes? Comments?
No.
All right.
No, they were fine.
All in favor of approving the minutes from March 7th as written, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to the business items for the evening with the Land Development Code amendments.
All right. So, yeah, many parts of this. I have the memo up because I think it might be helpful just go over every piece of it, and if you have any questions or issues that you want to discuss, we can do so. So the sign regs, I really tried to go through and make a good copy in the in the draft that I sent out. That's sent out in Word format so that you can turn on and off track changes. It's very hard to read otherwise. But just as a recap, we took all the sign regulations and replaced it with Burlington's sign regulations and adapted as necessary. And then there was some discussion last month about this. I tried to integrate the results of that discussion into the latest draft, and I also tried to clean up a few outstanding issues. So the issues that several of the changes that I think are worth noting. I redid the definitions just to prevent duplication where the definitions are already in the chapter itself. I took it out just to match the format of what Burlington is using. Of course, this will go through review by the municipal attorney when we kind of wrap this up. And I think if there's a problem, hopefully that they'll figure it out at that time. Any questions about that?
Well, I do have a question. I read through, and it was challenging to read. Things are just. It took me a while to figure out what 5 letters in a row meant, and I just said, I want to know. Just it's a mess. But I was looking for the substance of what I was reading, and I did not see. And I'm wondering if the definitions for like governmental signs and directional signs might be important, because when we talk about the various signs, which they're defined, those signs, however, are not defined in the list, or I missed it, as I was reading it. So since we do have discussions about directional signs, this might be important, especially when last meeting you talked about a directional sign. It's number 11 Maple Street. It might be helpful to understand.
So, right, there's some definitions that previously were in the the definition section of the LDC, but now
Now, where are they located?
they are located in the sign regs themselves. Let me see if it's
Well,
obvious.
that's where I did not see them, so, which is why I'm bringing it up.
So under sign standards, this would be 714, section 714. Let me try to see if I can make this bigger when, there we go. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, 714.
So it's under property management. This is under exemptions. So things
Okay.
that don't need a permit. And that includes everything under 0.5 over here. Okay, and it tells you basically signs that are intended primarily for use internal to the property. Examples may include some of these. So, at least according to the way Burlington structured their bylaws, that was sufficient to define what a directional sign is.
Okay. So governmental signs are,
Governmental signs, I think that's now under official signs.
official signs, okay. Those are the, like, men working and yield to tree cutters and that sort of thing.
Right. Highway and official signs, it's under
Okay.
0.1. So this includes
So,
things
okay.
put up, signs erected by or at the direction of a government agency, court, or public utility in the performance of their public duty.
All right, so in other words, you feel that this is sufficient definition, so if somebody said, well, what are you talking about? We could cite this as,
I think so. I think so, but maybe because we did have those definitions before. I mean, I could see if the municipal attorney when we cleaned this up, when we buttoned this up for the bring it to council, that can be, I can check to see if
Okay,
they think
alright.
there's a technicality there.
because the other ones all seem to be defined in each category, except for those two.
Okay. So that was government signs of directional.
Chris, do you mind going back to the directional sign section?
Yeah, I think that was 5. It's property management information or directional signs right there.
So it says non-illuminated sign 2 square feet or less.
Mhm.
And then if you go further down, it mentions directional signs again. I just saw it when you scrolled down last time, I believe. No, if you scroll the other way.
Oh,
Yeah, 16.
16. Oh, maybe that's another. I mean, it only goes up to 14. Where? Let me see.
No.
We're still in exemptions.
Yeah, the land development code that
I
sent
think that
was really strange. I mean, everything was chapter 11.
Do you mind just searching for direction again, the way you did it before? It was
so
highlighted.
Let me see it's directional signs number 16.
Yeah, so I think I'm still under exemptions.
I saw another it looked like another section that said businesses or residences were allowed a directional sign, and it looked like it was allowed to be four square feet, and it looked like, so there was
Yes. There was,
different information or conflicting information.
Okay, let's just double check here. Property management. So it is showing up. I'll go to results here. No, it's too many results to really see. But under exemptions, I think there is no number 16, if that's what.
Wait, go back up to where those highlighted sections were. There. So directional
Oh,
signs.
here.
So
12.
this sign may not exceed 4 square feet,
Okay.
but in the previous section, it was defined as 2 square feet.
right.
Premise. Okay, this is worth checking. I will. This might have been something we added back. This to me, this looks like language from the existing LDC.
Yeah, I just noticed it when you
yeah.
were scrolling. I didn't even pick up on it earlier reading, so.
Okay, good catch. In section 714C. Okay, yeah, I'll double check that. We might have brought this over from before because we didn't see it, and then I think this might.
And maybe the difference is that this is an off-premise directional sign.
Right.
And maybe the other one was specific to on the property directional
Right.
sign, so.
Any thoughts on this 2 versus 4 square feet difference?
Well, 2 square feet isn't a whole heck of a lot.
Especially if you, yeah, I was just thinking if you like,
I
try
mean-
to like tell people which way to go.
You know, it's,
I can default to 4 when if it turns out that these are conflicting.
well, and then since it says it may not exceed 4 square.
It could be smaller.
Yeah.
Okay. New share.
Because there are certainly places that need directional signs or, you know, this way in, this way out,
Okay.
that sort of thing.
Any other questions about definitions? Okay. Then the next thing I cleaned up was section 502H. This is the development review procedures. This is approval procedures for everything that needs approval, and then there's previously the entire sign approval procedure was outlined there, but now it's in the main sign section, which I think is actually kind of easier to use. So I just refer to it, but the appeal procedure remains the same, and I kept that there. Okay. The third item, this was just a few, like there were some technical fixes. I changed every mention of the word article to a chapter or section. There's a 1-year permit expiration that I put back in. Yeah, nothing controversial there, I think. And then number 4, flags. There were some differences in how the Burlington rules dealt with allowing for flags. Previously, the Essex Junction rules said that kind of specified what content the flags could have. So that's not it anymore. But I think one point of difference here is that for commercial properties, the number of flag poles you can have is based on how wide, how long your property is.
Well, I noticed that in the R1 and R2, it said you're allowed to have 1 flagpole.
Yeah.
But anywhere else, you could have up to 6.
Yeah. Based on how wide your property is. So like if you have a very
Right.
long, if you have a lot of frontage, then yeah.
You have potential for lots of flags, yes. So, and that seemed to be the only differential. So why have only one in the R1 and R2?
Well, in the R, if you go like, so if you set it to only allow for a flag if you're over a certain size, then a lot of small lots would not have the opportunity to have a flag if they really wanted one. I'm not totally sure if this is the right call. This was just copied over.
I'm just curious because I mean, some people might want to have 2 flagpoles.
What if?
Or like if they want a U.S. flag and a state flag or whatever. Or I know that people have flags that are might have seasonal greetings on them off their porches and whatnot. But so that's the reason I'm asking, is that there's some diehards that indeed enjoy flying flags.
I mean, you can fly 2 flags on one flagpole.
Yeah, people do that. I've
Yeah,
seen
they
that.
do that too. So I mean, I just want to understand. That's all.
What about a flag that's nailed to a garage? Or 2 flags that are nailed to a garage? Which I've seen.
No, without a banner instead.
I don't know. I'm asking. Is that a sign or is that a
Is that a flag?
banner or is it a flag?
Well, I think if it's not attached to a pole and we're being content neutral, and that I think that's a banner.
Yeah, I would agree.
But right now, this as it's written, you can have up to 2 flags in the R1 and R2 district, which may or may not be attached to one freestanding pole per lot. Each flag may be up to 15 square feet in area, no single dimension exceeding 5 feet. And you have to be outside of the setbacks.
I think it's fine by me. It makes sense.
Yeah,
It's fine.
Yeah.
I just want to understand.
I think it was
why we're budget-
just copied from Burlington.
Well, yeah, well, okay, but just because we're acquiring something from Burlington doesn't mean we shouldn't understand why we're
Sure.
acquiring it from Burlington. Does it make sense here? Sometimes some things from Burlington don't make any
No, I
sense.
agree. And we,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was more saying that we copied it and did not discuss it at all. Not that I remember anyway.
Okay. So if you're okay with that, then next thing I changed was something the part about neon signs and adding a permit requirement for neon window signs.
Sorry.
Other window signs don't require a permit, a sign permit, but neon signs would, and that would just allow us to be a little bit more careful with making sure that they're under the 20. I think it's a 20% coverage limits.
So the one commercial business that has a neon sign in just about every window they have is perfectly fine because they are within the size limit for the windows?
Correct.
Okay,
As it's written right now,
okay, all right.
that is, that was actually one of the examples that would put up.
Yeah, well, that's why
time.
I'm asking, and
Right.
the fact that it's not in the VC district, of course, neon is allowed in the VC district, but not in others. But it appears to have neon, and it's not in the VC district yet.
Right.
Right.
So, and that, I'm reading the room last time, it sounded like the planning commission members here made it seem like it was that the general direction of window coverage and whether or not you can have neon signs outside of the village center district remain the same as what the LDC currently says. So that has not been touched, but always up for
Okay. Well, I realize that we're attempting to migrate the VC district down Pearl Street. So, I mean, it may indeed encompass that.
Are we? I don't think we are.
Or where we move downtown? It was neighborhood district. What was going down?
The,
Oh,
yeah,
the
the,
neighborhood
the NDA,
stuff.
yeah, but that's
Okay.
separate from
That's separate.
DC,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think last time we did mention that, like, I don't think as those areas get denser, we wouldn't want illuminated window signs shining into other properties. So street facing seems to make sense. But I don't think there wasn't any edits of that sort yet, right?
there wasn't any. Sorry, what was
Is that in there at all about street facing for illuminated window signs?
No, it's still just
Yeah.
percentage
Yeah.
percentage of window covering. So
Which I think is fine for now. I'm not saying we need to do that. That was just part of the discussion as well.
right.
Yeah, I remember reading something about street facing. You know, we discussed that, but
Yeah, there's I didn't intentionally put in anything about street facing versus not street facing. I think outside of the village center district. We'll get there. Here, window signs. I think this is it. Here. So right, neon window signs shall require approval through a sign permit. BC district remains the same. One sign, unless you're on a corner lot, then you can have two. Yeah. Okay. Any?
I'm just wondering if it would make sense at this point in time, since this will be approved and become as the LDC in action, would it make sense to include that it should be street facing and that it's already there?
Should be street.
That the neon signs, I would think that you'd want to have let people know that you're open toward the street.
So, what if you were? So what if you were a business that has a parking lot at the back?
Good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to eliminate a light shining into
Right.
someone's property. Like that's what we're trying to address, is like a light that's a nuisance essentially shining into a property. So how would we
Well, do you have an
address that?
example in mind of that actually being a problem in this jurisdiction or somewhere else? Because it seems usually neon signs, unless they're really big, aren't nearly as bright as just a regular non-compliant porch light.
Yeah, I don't think we do, but I would assume it's more of an issue as the denser you get. And if the intention is to move denser, that's why I'm saying I don't know if it's something to address now or as we get denser. But I'm just saying I can see it being an issue.
Because the other part, the reason I also bring it up is that somewhere in here I read that whatever was out of compliance now would be grandfathered. So if something was out of compliance and we grandfathered it, then we're basically stuck with it
Well, that's
until somebody replaces it.
so if it is out of compliance with the existing LDC right now, then
Right.
then it's still out of compliance.
Well,
Like, we can still
yes,
catch it.
it would
But
still be.
if it is legal right now, but then the land development code is changed so that it is illegal, then that's grandfathered. So my only concern with I can see the rationale behind trying to avoid a nuisance. I do think the wording would need to be done really carefully so that you aren't accidentally prohibiting something that's like clearly necessary for the business, but is not significantly impacting
Yeah.
people around.
Yeah, I mean, I could see doing it as, we did the time frame for the string, like a time domain for the string lights.
Yeah.
I could see it being like that. So for any illuminated window signs that are not facing the street, they have to be off by a certain time. I don't know. It's not it's like a problem or trying to find a solution for a problem we don't have right now.
Tied to business hours?
Yeah,
It could be. Yeah.
It's just even then, like, if it's a rule that is difficult to enforce,
Right.
and we don't know if this problem exists, I'm not sure it's worth having to put that in right now. I mean, it's there are limits on how bright these illuminated signs can be. And they, as somebody who lives in downtown Burlington, where there are some signs, and they are allowed even when there are residential areas near there, I don't find them to be very, very much of a nuisance. But open to suggestions. This can also be something that you put on the back burner and just if it becomes a problem, you can try to fix it. But of course, with that approach, that business may be grandfathered, once you have the problem. But it's not a huge. I mean, I feel like even if it's a nuisance, it's not the biggest nuisance in the world. We have bigger problems here, I think.
Sure.
Okay, so multiple freestanding signs on large lots. That's another thing that was discussed last time. I added. Okay, so right. So basically, I put back that the allowance that we currently have in the LDC. It just seemed to make sense for the two larger strip mall properties that we have. In fact, for the second sign, I increased the allowable size just a little bit, with the hopes that all those temporary janky looking signs could encourage those to be brought into compliance. Any issues with that?
No.
Okay. Marquee signs. Oh yeah, this is something I thought up afterwards. So anything within the design review overlay district would have to be reviewed by the development review board. Seemed to me like a design issue. So yeah. Sandwich boards. So we were trying to figure out solution to the fact that sandwich boards are everywhere, but are almost always outside of the 15-foot distance. There's also the provision that they are only allowed during the business hours. From the discussion last month, that provision was kept. There were some suggestions that we moved towards what South Burlington is considering for the 15-foot requirement. They just say within a reasonable distance. I thought, well, if we say either 15 feet from the front door of the business or from a vehicular entrance or a pedestrian entrance to that property, I think we covered what we need. There is also a requirement that a sandwich board not be placed within, I think, 15 feet of another sandwich board, something like that.
12. Yeah.
12, yeah, something like that. Yeah. So this one is definitely, sandwich boards are an enforcement. It takes enforcement effort, but we do occasionally, and we have occasionally been out there, at least sending out letters to people who are non-compliant.
I used to work in South Burlington, and yes, I had one of those sandwich boards out. And yes, it probably was it was out on the street because being in the mall, you couldn't exactly see that things, so it'd be out there. 15 feet from entrance and whatnot, no, it's probably better than where they're placed now. So I would go with it. I think it's doable. The big catch is within business hours, I think, for a lot of places.
Right.
You know, it's your example of the VFW, you know, which of course is out there 24/7. You know, it doesn't, I mean, the verbiage on the sign gets changed, but the sign itself seems to be permanently located there.
Right. Yeah, I think we should definitely talk about that. I don't think that is a sandwich word. That's another kind of a thing. But that's something that might deserve some attention. I think everything here though, in terms of enforcement, I think rules should be written so that if my department goes out and enforces hard, which we could do, usually we don't do,
Right.
because there are higher priorities or because of political reasons. But we could, and if we do, you should make sure these rules are written so that you wouldn't be sad if we go and tell a small business that they have to do something differently.
Yeah, no, I like the addition of the pedestrian or entryway to the property. That makes sense. That I don't think we discussed last month. And I do maintain that I like the removed outside business hours. It just,
Yeah, because I can think of like the one like Post Office Square and whatnot. We have I think the Hallmark store always has a
yeah,
sandwich
I mean, it
sign.
just lends itself to a little bit of a cleaner sidewalk, a cleaner viewscape, streetscape, if you will. And then if you get a freak storm like we just had with some high winds, it potentially prevents some of those from getting blown all over the place and then never picked up or whatever it might be. And I also agree with the enforcement thing that you just said, Chris.
Right.
The priorities aren't always there, but it'd be nice to just have it there so you'd have some strength if you needed it.
Right. Okay. Next item, wall sign size limits. This is something we talked about last time. And what I heard was that there should be a difference between signs that are set back behind a parking lot versus signs that are up towards the street. So this draft is pretty generous still, but it says if the sign is within 50 linear feet of the nearest public road, then the sign size limit is 80 square feet. For reference, the Big Lots sign, the sign that says Big Lots is I think around 120. So this would make it a little more reasonable, but it's not. I don't think that this would be by any stretch overly restrictive. In fact, Winooski has much smaller limits. I think they're more like 40 or something like that. Okay. Oh yeah, and I haven't updated the photos yet. I will do that before the final copy. So yeah, here we go. This is, I think, something that's the VFW sign. I think that's the only situation where we have a property that does not have direct street frontage, but they like to have a sign that's out there. And as a kind of nonprofit veterans organization, I mean, we haven't been mailing them anything, but
They also have 2 flags, by the way.
true.
They do have 2 flags.
Right.
Actually, at least 2 flags. They might have more depending on the day.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's bad.
I guess my question is that I'm not sure how the mall there is configured. Is the Northfield and VFW separate properties?
Separate properties.
Okay, versus the mall itself.
Yeah. So these are the property. These are the parcels. These are the lots.
So playing devil's advocate here. So, Northfield may have gotten you know, the signs in the building plus the standing sign there. But do they have a permit? Can another business allow another business to put a sign on their property?
Well, they can certainly sell them the space on their own sign. So if they wanted to make the Northfield Savings Bank sign half as big and then dedicate half of it to the VFW and either give it to them for free or charge them money, that it would be in their legal rights to do that. But short of that, I mean, I don't know if they have a handshake agreement or anything with anybody, or it should be also noted that the property is owned by Gabe Handy, along with the whole mall. So it might have just been an agreement with him. But regardless of agreements, I mean, I think
Right.
if the businesses that were involved had agreed, what should be allowed from the municipal rule?
So
regulations?
my question was, the way our sandwich board rule is written now, intended to be written, would a sandwich board be allowed there because it would be 15? I'm assuming that's the vehicular and pedestrian access to that property.
Yeah,
It's true.
It would not be
Right.
allowable.
I mean, it's on the other lot, so I'm assuming they would have to get permission to put something on their lot. But a sandwich board would be allowed there for that business.
That's a good point. I think as it's written, that might actually work. So this would exceed the
Yeah, that's not a
outside
sandwich
section,
board, clearly. What's there? But
that could be a viable solution, but they would have to take it in, which, I mean, that's a lot of work.
Oh,
Or-
you know those little dolly things? They work wonders.
Yeah.
That's what I used. So I mean, they can happen. So, but what kind of a sign is this? If this isn't a sandwich, then what is it?
I think this is the closest thing this would be is a freestanding sign with changeable letters, and that you could probably permit this if you made it a little bit nicer. If the Northfield Savings Bank sign didn't exist, you could probably have something similar
Well,
permanently.
the only thing that I was looking now, I can't find it. There's, whoops, here it is. Under section G, discontinuance and removal, any sign advertising an activity, business, service, or product must be removed. So I had kind of a question on that because this seems to be advertising an activity or a service or a product to a certain extent. But the question I had is whether or not business should be included in there. This is a separate item, but did you find it?
Yeah, it's right here. I think, right?
Yeah.
So this is
So this sign, their sign is advertising a service and a business and an activity. Because they're advertising the fish fry.
right.
So does that mean when the fish fries over, the letters for the fish fry need to come down?
Well,
I think
I
the
can.
question is, what does this mean?
This
think
is the intention of this was more for businesses that closed down. So like the Domino's building should not have a Domino's still on it.
But the way I read it is that you can't have a sign outside your business that says, for example, we're having a fish fry. Because that's a sign that's advertising an activity. It's a little bit confusing to me, whether or not maybe I'm just misreading.
No, well, it says you could sign advertising within 60 days of the activity. So, must be removed within 60 days of the activity. So, if they were having the fish fry on August 6th, and they still have things on there to August 20th,
Okay.
it
then
wouldn't
that's
be
okay.
it wouldn't be until December that it would need to come down, because the activity's a little old at that point. But if they have a fish fry on a regular basis, they just need to change the dates as to keep it current.
So under this, they could do it,
They could do it. You know,
but they don't comply with well,
the
It's
freestanding
also-
sign thing is another thing.
It's also how you define activity, because the fish fry sounds like an event,
Right.
and an activity could be like we're fixing cars here for like like that's
well, an activity could be a sporting event.
where we're changing oil for 10 days here, 30 days. I don't know. That's yeah, it's definitely a little vague. But I think the crux of this issue is that that's the Northfield property, and under the rules they would not be able to permit both of these signs.
Right.
That's the issue.
But if they had a sandwich board closer to the entrance, it would be allowable.
Well,
The sandwich board couldn't be within a certain distance of the Northfield sign.
Right, right.
Actually,
You'd have to-
actually,
Within 12 feet.
more than likely, the sandwich board could go across the driveway
On the other side.
on the other side, where the other crosswalk is, and probably go over there.
I think there's already something there.
Well, there's a lot of things over there.
There's still other things there.
So, I'm sorry, and I wasn't at last month's meeting, so I'm playing catch up on the specifics. But when we're looking at the definitions of the signs that we've absorbed from Burlington, is there something prohibiting? Because the Northfield sign is a monument sign in my reading,
Right.
and this would be a freestanding sign. Each description specifies you can have one. Is there something saying you can't have one of each?
Unless it's I don't remember
Yeah,
them saying that.
Because they're talking about like when they're talking about the number that you can have in the descriptions, they're talking about you can have X number of this type of sign.
Right.
I'm trying to see if there's something that says like
I don't actually think this would be considered a monument sign.
I'm sorry, I thought
it's-
it was continuous. Not
Yeah.
allowed. I agree.
But-
I thought a monument sign. My point.
I
goes
guess
away.
right. Theoretically, that could be a kind of sneaky way to get around it.
They made a monument sign.
Right.
So VFW
But
built a monument
is
sign.
that VFW sign on Northfield's property or is it in the right of way?
Hard to tell for sure.
Because if they put it on the other, if they put a sandwich board on the other side of the light pole there,
Yeah. Hey, another creative solution would just be to help VFW get a sign that's in compliance. Like either we help them, Northfield Savings Bank, get theirs into a monument. Suggest, I mean, there could be some ways to do it, but if you look at also on the other opposite side, the other corner of the entranceway there, the sign, the freestanding sign, or the strip mall there. I mean, what if, could we approach Handy and VFW and say, hey, can we jack that up a little bit and allow the VFW to advertise right on that freestanding sign? Just on the other opposite corner of the entranceway, but it's still,
Actually, that could be right. That could be a viable solution now that the size limits have gone up a little bit for the second the second sign, freestanding sign for these larger properties. So
yeah. And knowing that it's a veterans nonprofit, would there be a way that it could be assisted as well? In some fashion? I know that's always a heavy lift.
It's not whenever we're trying to take it down. We're just trying to assist them getting
Into compliance.
into
Yeah.
compliance. That's the whole point. I mean, the other part is that it's kind. You know, we talk about permanent signs. I mean, in the same property, there was a permanent real estate sign out, and yes, sometimes there's a business that's empty, and some. Right now, there's no businesses space empty, but the sign's still out there. So, it seems to be somewhat of a permanent advertising for that real estate company.
With this VFW one, I'll say it doesn't bother me. And it, again, coming down to the idea of enforcement and the amount of time that the city has to put towards this sort of stuff. If there are no complaints, then we let it ride for a while, and if it does become an issue, then we can begin to work with them to get into compliance.
right. Yeah, I think as long as there's a viable pathway towards compliance, that I think that's what the planning commission should make at this point.
I think we've established 3
Yeah,
pathways.
that's sounds good.
I mean, I can just see the people across the street going, "You let them have that, but you didn't let me have." Well, they're competing across the street. They're competing across the street, you know, two different grass strips, whatever. I mean, I don't blame them for putting there. I understand why they're there. It's just that we're trying to get them in compliance. That's
So that's all I've got for sign regulations. I think at this point, things should be in pretty good shape. Is there anything else that's
No,
regarding signs?
no. I'm signed off.
Excellent. Me too. Okay. The next item I have here is just an update on the electric vehicle charging requirements. Yeah, at this point, I don't think it would be a good idea to move forward with trying to do municipal regulations. But that can be revisited when South Burlington figures theirs out, and also we can see how well this softer approach works.
I mean, when I was reading this, of course, being on the planning commission, when we were giving applicants guidance, we were usually saying that they needed to follow the state regs, which of course I think encourages but doesn't compel.
No, now they changed.
Now,
the state
no,
regs
now
have
they
changed.
compelled it. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but at the point I was on there, it was encouraging them to comply versus now it's more stick than carrot. So I don't see why the DRB couldn't continue to say, you need to follow state, requests and compliances, which would keep us in compliance with that. Would it not?
I think it can be mentioned that you should follow the state
Follow state
rules,
rules, yes.
but the VLCT's lawyer was saying that they don't think there's apparent authority to condition a permit on a state requirement when you're a municipal board.
I was a little confused by the statement here that the B issuance by a municipality of a certificate of occupancy for residential construction, because we do issue certificates of occupancy, right?
Yep, and we do ask for a certificate of compliance with the residential and commercial building efficiency standards.
Okay.
But
It's the self-certified.
that's a
thing.
self-certification.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Essentially, we don't have the teeth to enforce it. The state has to enforce it, but we're at least
Right.
collecting the certification, the self-certification
Yeah.
from the developer that they did this.
Yeah. Well, and strangely enough, even the state, at least they don't have procedures to enforce it right now. It says in statute that enforcement is through the next person who buys that property and then finds that it was not compliant, and even though their certificate said it was, then they can sue them back for the money it takes to retrofit
Right.
into compliance.
Well, we're at least by requiring that we get that certification, we're essentially protecting the future buyer from fraud.
Right.
Because that would, if they self-certified something that wasn't true, that would be fraud.
Yes.
And as a part of the development review process, I'm always happy to ask about the location and placement of anything on a site as a part of the site plan. So the way for the last few applications that have come through, I pointed out that the CBES has some electric vehicle charging requirements. Where are you planning to put the electric vehicle chargers?
Yeah.
And then so far they've been like, oh yeah, you need 2 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Seems
think
like
reminding them that
Right.
this is now going to be required as of July 1st.
Right. In theory, if they're like, we don't want to do it, then it's not a big deal. But I don't think that
Okay.
happens really.
So the
far.
question, next question I
Well-
have about charging stations is that do we or does the state put that put up a sign that says, please allow cars that need to be charged to park here, because then we have a car that likes to park on the other side of the fire department, which is our only charging station. And this gentleman likes to park his truck there on a regular basis, which doesn't allow anybody with a charging vehicle to go and charge because he's parked there.
Right. So there is a sign there that says electric vehicle
Charging station.
charge. I don't know if it says electric vehicle only. The CBS and RBS have some verbiage in there to say that you're supposed to have a sign that says no parking other than electric vehicles. So in terms of, yeah, I'm not sure there's anything.
In other words, I'm asking, is the
that's
city in compliance with the signage that's required? Because there's someone who's obviously oblivious to the fact that they're in a gas-propelled vehicle and it's an electric charging station. Someone needs a reminder of being a good egg and Samaritan.
So I can check on that. Okay. It wouldn't be a compliance issue, but it might be something that, because if it's associated with the CBS and RBES, there's nothing that the city is doing at this point that requires a new certificate. Okay. Although actually, in theory, maybe the Lincoln Hall renovations might trigger that. But I can look into that sign. That it wouldn't be too hard if it was a matter of changing a sign. It might be a little more difficult to actually go out there and ticket the guy.
I think I think it's a matter of talking to the correct department.
Right.
But other than that,
So sorry, Chris, back to your example. If a developer said, oh no, we don't want to do that, then they would still have to provide a self-certification
Correct.
of that in order, like when they get the COA.
Right. That's
Oh,
right.
COO.
so
Yeah,
in other-
okay.
So in other words, if they didn't do it, they'd be lying. They'd be fraud.
Yeah,
Right. You can give them an angry glare.
yeah. We'd be like,
Wag your finger.
we know you're defrauding this, but we can't do anything about it. And the state has no mechanism yet. Okay.
Yeah. I think more likely, if there was any pushback, it would be they would say their interpretation of the RBES or the CBES is that it's not necessary or something like that. I can imagine that being
Sure.
much
Yeah,
more common.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Rather than an admission of
Right.
this is what it says. We're not.
Right.
That makes sense.
Right. Okay. Any other questions or discussion about EV charging at this point? Okay, so this is
No, other than I'm disappointed.
We can go over to South Burlington and tell them to get there. Show them.
we can certainly revisit this based on how it's actually going with the new developments that are coming up. You know, if they're doing it basically. Okay, so the next issue is something that came up with an actual permit application. So food trucks and trailers, so far, right now they're supposed to only operate for just under 6 months to qualify as I think it's a temporary structure. A temporary use in a temporary structure. So this has been, I'd say, not. I think the previous administration has not been very strict with this, especially throughout COVID. And there have been several businesses that across the streets that have started up and actually been successful. So, yeah, I guess the first question is, does it make sense to allow for food trucks and trailers to operate for longer than 6 months at a time?
Well, you gave the example of Nomad.
Mm-hmm.
That's now Cuban sandwich shop essentially.
Mhm.
And those people have invested in that property. So if they had to relocate after 6 months, that would be a major financial burden for them.
That is actually exactly the reason I brought this up. They were the applicants. That I was like, well, I don't know if I have a solution for you right now, but well, this can be discussed.
Yeah, I had a long conversation with them as well. Not about this, but
Right.
Well,
about their business.
but it seems to make sense to have, if we wanted to essentially have a temporary structure food permit, that they have to apply or renew every
6
6 months minus a day, that would essentially be driving them into compliance with whatever other regulations have to be going on at the same time. So if the purpose is to have them operating in compliance, that would drive it to be in compliance. You know, because if it degrades, let's say that the Nomad thing would degrade and it wasn't in compliance anymore due to habitation, okay, or something, then it would be in jeopardy. You know, I think of the sausage guy around the corner from me. Okay, he's there and he's not there. I mean, as he moves from event to event, and you know, he's not tied down, but allows his business to move to where the activity is. So they theoretically, I guess, could unhook things and do the same thing if they wanted. But if the compliance permit is that they're complying to standards, then I think that's the tenor of what we're trying to get at, is to have people in compliance.
Is this in the memo? Sorry, written. Is this what's currently in the LDC, or is this amendment, or is this like potential changes?
Oh, there were supposed to be colors here. So this includes potential changes. I actually I meant to have there were track changes on for just the parts that I added, but it didn't show up in the PDF.
Because this all seems to make sense to me.
Yeah.
Like this seems right. Like
As
you
presented.
can get consecutive renewals as long as nothing falls out of compliance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So
It's not a problem. Because I'm assuming that's their argument is that we only get 6 months. It's not really, and who knows if we can get extensions. It's not really investment friendly for a business to
Right.
do that. So yeah,
Yeah, and it's an approach that is supported by other members of the Development Technical Review Committee. So one option that I had thought of was just permitting something like that as a permanent structure, right? Because like they could apply for a site plan, just a typical regular site plan, but according to our regs, they would have to hook into sewer. So I was like, well, why don't we could make an exception for that, and maybe food trucks could just be exempted as long as they comply with sewer treatment, something or other. But the city engineer and also Chelsea Manigo, the water quality superintendent, both thought that that didn't make as much sense as just having them renew continuously. So
I think that makes sense.
yeah, I think the renewal makes sense.
But so just out of curiosity, so that temporary structure, they have gray water and they have obviously food waste. Is that all self-contained?
that is self-contained. They have to take that off-site. And
Yeah.
they're under the LDC, they are not allowed to dump that down the toilets. They have to bring it like straight to the treatment plant and pay a fee.
Okay.
Like same as septic tank.
And the food truck would also have their own their own waste.
They have their own container.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just the general premise that you include in the memo of like similar to sandwich boards, but just like given the encouragement that we as a community are trying to put towards small local businesses, that the example of Nomad, of being able to start in a space like that, move into a brick and mortar structure, like that's exactly the type of dynamic that we're hoping to facilitate and encourage in this community. So yeah, I think the whole the fact that the track changes weren't on, yeah, was kind of a not. I think it reads well.
Excellent. Yeah, and I do have that version on now that does show the track changes.
Besides, they have really good food.
The new one.
Yeah,
I haven't tried it yet.
and I haven't tried their Cuban sandwich, but I hear it's pretty good.
It's the best one I've gotten in
Have
Vermont.
you tried it?
Yeah.
I had their,
Yeah.
I had their, I had their tacos, but I didn't try the sandwich.
Okay, so the next item here is a kind of a technical tweak that came up during the development review process, site plan reviews, and that is kind of that is the allowance for tandem parking spaces. So tandem parking already exists for single family houses all the time with a driveway. We just never, it's just rarely allowed in multi-family buildings, but that is starting to change with other municipalities, just especially when you're trying to encourage the development of like 2 or 3 bedroom apartments and condos. They tend to have more than one car, but this is a kind of creative, cheaper way to squeeze that in some weird layout sometimes. Any
My question was for section D there, tandem spaces must be assigned to the same dwelling unit. Any thought on how this might play out considering we only require 1 spot per dwelling unit now?
Well, it is for the whole. We say that's an average, right? One space per dwelling unit for the entire development, but it could be that there are some of the units are 2 bedrooms and some of the units are studios, and let's say the average studio has half a car.
Okay, yeah. So it would allow them to be creative with their space making. Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me then.
Yeah, and the reality is most developers are going above 1 space per dwelling unit still, just based on market demands. 17 Park, for example, that is something that's gonna see the final site plan review in 2 weeks. They have more than 1, even though they're having to build underground structured parking, and that's expensive. They're still doing it.
Where's 17 Park?
Domino's building,
I
which shouldn't have a Domino's sign according to the sign regs.
was wondering when that was gonna get developed.
I was wondering when the building was gonna be brought down. It hasn't been brought down yet.
Are the dimensions, is that like a standard? Is that some sort of
This
a
is
9 by 34?
So 9, yeah. So that's just double a regular parking space that we regulate. But this is the wording here was copied directly from Williston's.
Yeah. 34 just seems long, but I know parking spots in general tend to be pretty big
Yeah, and it's
in coding.
Well, it depends on the vehicle. I mean, you could, if you had a travel camper or these microbuses or whatever, you could get into 34.
A truck.
Truck.
This is America Day.
Oh my God, trucks. Okay, I mean, some trucks are.
Right, I know. No, I'm just saying if the intention is for developers to be creative, if you made it a little bit smaller and then they're able to fit a couple more spots, they're like, well, we can cater to the eco-friendly vehicles, but not in these tandem spaces, but not to F-150s.
I can double check it. Like it's I'll
Yeah,
look
I
at,
don't know. I just
Burlington's is also at this length. You know, maybe we'll if there are other jurisdictions that have a shorter standard, we can go with the
My property in Burlington, it's technically 2 parking spots, and I've always had 3 tenants, and they've always fit 3 cars in the 2 parking spots. So that's like,
right.
that's why I'm always like, the parking spots always seem really big as defined.
Well, unless you got an F-150 or 250.
And it's tandem. Those are tandem parking spots on my property.
Okay. PUDs. This is something we mentioned at the very beginning of what I opened up the whole discussion about the LDC amendments. So, plan unit developments is a way to get around dimensional standards. If you're trying to be creative and some would argue that PUDs are only necessary if you don't have good zoning regulations. If your setbacks are too restrictive, because this is a little bit subjective. But this avenue exists for a reason, because a lot of municipalities had very restrictive zoning. In fact, we have somebody right now, I think 132 Pearl, who is applying by through this use of a PUD application. Same with Robin Way. That's the development with 6 houses in a kind of a narrow lot. That's
The one off Maple Street.
off Maple Street.
Yeah.
That was a PUD. So the PUD rules right now are written so that the intention is that you have to go above and beyond to kind of qualify to bend the rules for setbacks and other dimensional standards. But they're also written with detached houses in mind. The biggest issue here that makes it difficult to apply to multifamily, multi-story buildings is the private outdoor space requirements. And it was saying it was like 700 square feet or something.
Yeah, 750.
Yeah.
700. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's like
expecting
bigger than my
it's-
apartment.
Yeah, well, expecting a spot about this size behind somebody. In other words, you can put your picnic table up or whatever and have a space to do it. If you have only 40 square feet, I don't even know if you could put a hibachi on the balcony. And get away with it with fire cuts. But at least you'd be able to put a couple chairs out there. I mean, and that was, I think, the rationale was that people have a small yard that was their own. That's why it was 750 feet.
Right. But so this is something that this is wording I came up with, and you might want to look on the screen for this one if you don't have the track changes version, because red indicates what I made up. And this is certainly, the commission did not discuss this in detail, so especially these dimensions. I was thinking that it would be nice, it would be useful to have as an alternative to outdoor kind of yard space, private yard space, to just allow and encourage balconies for multi-story buildings. And I looked up the average size of a balcony. There are smaller balconies out there, and there are bigger ones. I thought 40 seemed like a middle ground, and that's why I went with that. And I said that for the ground floor units, they should just actually have a little bit of private space. But I didn't make it very big, because when you have a multi-story, multi-family building, you might as well be dedicating more space for common use rather than
Gonna be my
right keeping it.
Yeah.
Just
what about just like a common green or is there something?
Yeah.
Is
yeah,
it,
the next
My
point.
my thought on this is we definitely should adjust this to not restrict multi-story buildings, because that's a shame that it's written that way right now. But I'm not sure a deck or balcony is the way we want to go either. Like, at least personally, like I don't think like we just want to then just restrict a developer into having to build balconies for every single unit.
Yeah,
And I'm not sure that's what we want for the Junction either, like a multi-story building with balconies for every unit. I mean, could be nice, but I'm thinking of like what you're saying, like a common space being the whole point of a PUD is to be really creative, like rooftop decks for like, for residents. If you're going multi-story, I don't know, but just being a bit more creative with that.
So there's already a requirement for common open space. I didn't include the entire thing over here. That's why it's got the dots down here.
Yeah.
The PUDs always said that there needed to be both common and private open space. Now, I don't know if what I've observed from other cities as a result of regulation or just market forces, but if you go just north of here to Montreal, almost like I would say more than 50% of the units there have balconies, and I mean personally, I think it's pretty nice. I've lived on a 5th floor with a balcony before, and I've eaten outside on many nice days. But that's also very subjective. So I'm happy to hear everyone's thoughts.
Well, there's a building across the way here that has balconies, or they appear to be balconies. I think this building here also has balconies in some spots. But yes, the PUD I thought was supposed to be creative. And that by saying shall, you really have restricted it, because there are some places that perhaps a common space might be more lucrative for the tenants and the owner than having private balconies. So it's a matter of, I keep hearing John say, okay, we need to have the best idea presented. So how are we going to get the best presented if we've already said you will have a balcony, you will have decks? We're not allowing any creativity to occur because we've already prescribed it. So I guess that's. I mean,
I'm gonna weigh in on the side of balconies, just hypothetically, because I agree. I have lived in places in much denser urban settings, and have really personally felt the benefit of even a small outdoor space that is connected, both for being able to be physically outside, even though you're still in your large building, but in your personal space. But then also too thinking about like how people use that for, let's say, drying clothes in a way that they might not be using a common space in the same way, or it might create tensions if we're all trying to just. So I think I appreciate you pointing out that there is already the 15% common space, and I think that really is, there's a lot of creativity there. I guess personally, I was like, yay balconies! Like, do we need the ground floor to have the 100 square feet piece? Could we make it? Could it be what is it? 40 square feet for all units, and then have the common space be with the real focus of where we want people to be creative.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not saying we necessarily need to eliminate the option of doing balconies, but also providing maybe alternatives that allow for creativity. I mean, I could see coming up with something like some sort of, like, maybe the developer comes up with a creative alternative that allows for some sort of common space that is equal to the overall, whatever 40 square feet per unit is. Like, here's our alternative from doing balconies. We've provided,
You could have 20.
we've provided
percent
400 square feet of something.
So would that be in addition to what's already required, the 15% requirement under C? Because I would think every developer would say that, oh, we're already providing fantastic common open space. We want to skip the balconies.
I'm trying to think about what I consider to be PUD. An example is when I went to London to visit my daughter last year, we stayed in an apartment complex, an Airbnb that had a balcony and it had a common space. And it was nice every morning to go out and have my coffee on the balcony and look at the skyline in London. And it was nice to know that there was a place down there where you could congregate with people, have a drink or have a, event. That's very nice. But when I think about like the building across the street, also a PUD doesn't have to be like an HOA or something, doesn't have to have some kind of management group within it, like a condo association. When I think of, again, common space, I think of Autumn Pond. I don't think of McGillicuddy's. And if you're asking McGillicuddy's developer to put a balcony in every unit, that's going to be a significant cost to the developer. So
Well-
I'm trying to think about what
Yeah, it's very-
what constitutes a PUD.
It's very different if you're talking about Autumn Pond or you're talking about building in the village center.
Yeah.
It's very different.
So
And do we define that as a PUD?
no. So a PUD is something you only need to go to if zoning really doesn't work for you. In fact, we don't want to see that many PUDs because that kind of shows our zoning's broken.
Well, you
It's,
can get, you
it-
can
it
get
allows-
density. You can get density bonuses, right? And now there's all these
Yes.
new density bonuses.
There's one density bonus there that can be available, but the main thing is kind of going against dimensional standards. Setbacks is one of the requirements that you could skip if you go with a PUD. So it doesn't need to be good enough. It doesn't need to be useful for everybody. But it is. I think it should be written so that it is, for these edge cases where the current setback rules or whatnots are too restrictive. There's a way around it. I can imagine one way out of this debate is to reduce the requirements for, if you're going to do balconies, to not 100% of the units needed. We could save 50% of them or something. And then, maybe that might make it easier and still squeeze out some benefits.
Is the current example the desired bonus is the setback bonus?
Yeah.
And the issue is that it's restricted because not every unit can have open space because it's a multi-story.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
I can see that, like in some of the buildings that are here in downtown, that because they've put parking on the ground floor, you wouldn't be able to have a residential unit with the ground floor. So they wouldn't be able to get the 100 square feet. It wouldn't be possible because of the layout of the building.
Yeah.
So.
Well, maybe
so
that's the first thing we should deal with. Does 100 not make sense? Because if it doesn't make sense, I can just take that out.
Well, what I'm saying is that in some cases, some of these buildings here right now don't have ground floors. They have first floors. They don't have ground floors. Ground floor is either an office that manages the building, or it's parking garage, or it's businesses. So so having 100 square feet of air.
No, but that would be for residential. So in your
Right,
case,
in
you're
this
saying
case,
there's no
there's no
residential.
residential.
So it doesn't apply.
It doesn't apply.
Right.
I mean, is it conflicting the 750 and 100 right now?
I tried to make it not. So it's basically
Oh,
I
it's-
kept it 750 because I nobody told me to take it out. But it's saying that if you are basically trying to build just rearrange single family houses in a weird shape, yeah, you got to do 750 because that's what the land development code has always said. Does that make sense? I don't know, but I made a
Yeah,
carve
the
out
100
so
only
that
applies
if,
to multi-unit,
Right,
multi-story.
right.
Okay.
No, I mean, I like this, the way it's written. I think having, you're on the second, third floor of a unit, having your own private space, and I think it allows itself for creativity because it says include private outdoor space, such as a deck, balcony, or similar something. So I think it allows the creativity to be there. I don't want it to default to or defer to common space. So then what are you doing? Making a rooftop deck with 10, 40 square foot squares and says, here's your private space. That doesn't seem necessarily fair to me. I like the way it's written.
Philip, I'll look to you for direction.
If the commission likes the way it's written, it's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we talked about.
Yeah, this can always be tried. It is possible, once if this passes, it may be reviewed during the transit oriented development study because they're doing a review of all zoning regs that affect that corridor. Okay. A few other changes with state statutes. There was kind of a mistake. Multifamily 3, I always assumed that the density limits there would be much higher. But right now it says you're limited to 3 per lot, and state statute says you have to allow 4. So that's just be changed. Certain uses, hospitals, emergency shelters, they say the municipalities cannot regulate other than for certain nuisances like well, actually no, you can only regulate for I think dimensions or something. It has to be a permitted use everywhere. I'll just add that in. So then the last item I have that I wanted to add on is a new thing we're encountering it right now. And it has to do with accessory apartments. So accessory apartments were invented as a way to increase allowable densities at a time when it was mostly single family homes that were allowed. So then, I mean, I don't know if anybody was around when that first became a thing, but they were pretty restrictive. I think there was a lot of pushback even to allowing one more unit at the back in your backyard or at the back of your house. So then the regulations ended up being crafted so that the person living there has to be related to you. That's how it started. And then it got loosened a little bit, and they were like, well, that person doesn't have to be related anymore, but at least but the main unit has to be, the main house has to be owner occupied. And then the last round of land development code amendments, we changed that as well. And we're like, nah, only either of the houses has to be owner occupied. It doesn't matter which one. You can live in the smaller unit at the back if you want. And this is, I think, in line with state statute now. The state statute requires that it can't be so restrictive, but it still allows for some restrictions. But the main thing that remains kind of an issue is that based on the state's definition, or like a common definition of accessory apartments and accessory dwelling units, they have to be accessory to a single family house, a single family home. So state statute doesn't specifically say that you have to define it that way. It just says you cannot restrict somebody from having a separate accessory dwelling unit out on the that's detached from your house, from your single family house. But then our land development code says that that it should be that the accessory apartment is accessory to the single family house. In this case, we've got somebody that's trying to turn this garage into an apartment upstairs. They would make some changes to the interior, make it up to code, and you wouldn't even notice it from the outside. That building's always been there. But this house, the house at the front, is currently a duplex. So right now in most zoning districts, this is the R2, you are only allowed one principal structure. So we don't see a way of giving them permits unless they go through a whole PUD process, which may be something that that they could explore. But yeah, I want to see if the planning commission thinks this makes sense right now, that we're under the 4-unit limit, which was the intention of the Home Act. And within one building, you could have built a bigger building, you could have 4 units in there. But then they're proposing 3, and we're saying no. Is that
So-
weird?
And the distinction here is because it's a duplex rather than just a single family.
Because they're not even trying to touch a duplex.
Yeah, but it's because it is two.
That's right.
So just for clarity, in our LDC, we say an ADU only applies to a single family
Yeah, well, here it is.
property.
Accessory apartments, we don't call it ADUs for some reason, we call it accessory apartments. And it says right in the purpose that it's to allow for small apartments within or pertinent to an existing single family dwelling. Oh, there's an existing single family dwellings. Some grammar there, issues
Yeah,
there.
that's our loophole. The S.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it doesn't actually say that much. I mean, it mentions single family lots under here, but we don't really have single family lots anymore because everything is, you're allowed to have 4 units in every lot. But I've asked around other planners in the region, and there seems to be a general agreement that ADUs are were meant to be pertinent to single family homes, and that when it's a duplex, it's not a single family home. Maybe it doesn't make sense, but maybe they think the solution might be to allow for multiple buildings per lot.
Well,
But
that,
then that opens
if
up a
I
whole.
looked at that lot, it's already got 3 buildings on it. Because you've got the house in whatever configuration it's at, it's already got an addition on it.
Right.
You've got the garage with the tin roof, and then you've got the building behind, which is a three bay
The carriage
ro-
house.
carriage house.
Is it the same?
I actually think I might be mistaken. It might so I think it is actually the same lot, but I actually think it might be this larger one that they're looking to convert the upstairs into living space. But they got this was grandfathered for whatever reason they were allowed to have 2 structures. One of them might have been a barn before. But you were always allowed to have a detached garage. And then
Oh, I could think of a building up the hill from there that had, if it hasn't been divided, it has 6 buildings on the property.
right.
So one of them being a set of apartment, two of them being a set of apartments. So I mean, it's in the neighborhood, literally. You go behind, up behind, but it's the Morrison's old property. But it's just at this point in time, they'd have to go through a PUD to get that passed through, because our rules don't allow that conversion without the PUD. as I read them.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
but it makes sense to put housing. It makes sense to put housing there.
yeah.
It does. It literally does.
My opinion is that there's no problem with this, and I think the relevant question to ask is that we no longer have single family lots anymore because of the state statute that allows duplexes and triplexes in any district. So I think the question, Chris, you're asking is, do we change this to be allowed in any residential, or to be allowed where duplexes and triplexes exist, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I think the ultimate question is what
What do you
are
define as an
multiple
ADU?
units, I mean, multiple buildings per lot acceptable if you're under a total number, I don't know, like 4 total units or something. Or is it actually permissible does it make sense to say you can have a 4plex as per state statute in the main building, and you can still have an ADU at the back and make it 5?
Well, we still regulate the size of the ADU, right?
Yeah, the size of the ADU would still have to be apply, right? Because it would be the percentage of the main building.
If you want to treat that as an ADU. But the other policy approach to this would be to say that you're allowed to have multiple buildings per lot. In fact, that's what Burlington's neighborhood code is doing. They're allowing, even in the
Very
low
aware of that.
density
Yeah, I mean,
neighborhoods, 2 buildings per lot. They're saying 4 units per building, if they meet certain, dimensional, if it's big enough, basically.
no, I mean, I guess that's kind of where I was trying to formulate it in my mind. 'Cause, right, an ADU, I think the intent there is to be even statewide, a single family home with a single unit. And then you have that accessory dwelling unit aside from it. If you're now into the duplex, triplex, adding an additional unit, even if it's an ADU, like now you're adding, it's increased in density, but I like with the way you put it with like, it's that extra building, and allowing multiple buildings per lot, which then would allow for them to even make the apartment larger than what the regulations are for an ADU.
Right.
I think
Probably more beneficial. I would rather go that route and keep the ADUs for single family.
going away from the ADU route, though, eliminates the owner occupied aspect of it. So in this situation, is one of the units owner occupied in the duplex?
It would be, yeah.
Yeah.
But it does offer a complication, and as it stands right now, if somebody builds an ADU, they live in one of the buildings for a while, and then one day they sell the property. Person who buys it wants to rent out everything. We have to basically revoke this CO for perfectly livable space.
Because they're not going to live there.
Because because it's not owner occupied, which we've never had to do, but it's also maybe on a complaints basis, 'cause, like, we wouldn't know. But does that make sense anyway? If the housing, if the space there exists and it's perfectly livable,
It made sense before duplexes and triplexes were allowed everywhere.
Right.
Although I'm just going to counter my own self here and think to myself, what if you did have somebody who had a large single family home, decided to build a detached ADU, move into the smaller unit so they can rent out the larger unit, and then split the larger single family home into a duplex, which is, I mean, essentially, to some extent, this question at hand.
Right.
Why would we want to potentially limit that sort
we
of
would actually kick
housing
him.
situation?
Yeah, we would actually kick that person and be like, you can't live in your own space.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem very good.
Well,
But-
before it used to be a prescribed means of how things were subdivided. In this case, we're taking it back. Right, instead of going forward and saying we're going to subdivide. In this case, we're just saying it's already subdivided. Why can't we just move
Yeah.
forward
Mhm.
with it.
I mean, if the ADU, if the unit that they're proposing meets the dimensions of an ADU, you're only allowed one per property. You're not allowed two ADUs. I would think it's okay.
Well,
I'm just
Patrick,
countering myself.
what you had proposed earlier, like of going towards a route of allowing multiple buildings per lot, someone that has already built an ADU but then wants to not meet the owner occupied requirements, or the ADU thing doesn't work anymore because they want to divide the main building into a duplex. If you then change the rules to allow multiple buildings per lot, they could just re-permit that space as just
Right.
another unit. If that if that was allowed under zoning.
So how did the building next door, which is, I believe, 3 or 4 apartments, how did that get, how was that created? Yeah, something or other, yeah.
I don't have the history of that. So
I don't have a history for that either. It's just, it existed. Somehow somebody did, obviously, if the lots were all the same size, that was 2 lots, 3 lots
Yeah.
that were
I mean,
combined.
I'm just thinking in terms of like, if it is the ADU, then the property owner would need to live on the property. If they decide to vacate, they would have to then forfeit their ADU unless they come again and say, hey, could we work something out? They get multiple multiple buildings per lot, in which case they could get the additional permit. In that way, or if we go allow this with an ADU with a duplex or a triplex, but also move forward with the other idea of having multiple buildings per lot, that would give, I mean, that just gives people more options, more housing options, where they could then choose to create an ADU and then in the future move off the property and allow and get the property re-permitted as multiple buildings.
So why does this have to be ADU? Why can't this be a PUD and create?
this probably could be a PUD. It's just, we don't PUDs are kind of for edge cases that you, like that zoning doesn't work. But PUDs are kind of high bar in many ways that you're supposed to not hand those out easily.
And it would have to meet all that criteria.
Right, all that open
put in the
space and
PUD.
And I would
they
think with
could
the
do better.
Yeah, and I would think with the new laws that have been put in place for ADUs and even our change in the LDC, it's probably the most cost-effective way to add an additional housing unit. So to go through all of these other permitting steps, you're creating potential future restrictions and then making it more challenging to add housing unit to the community.
I'm not opposed to going the 2 building route. It just seems like that might be like a big piece to bite off right now. Like it seems like that would be a big change. I don't know if the will is there to make that change. But changing the accessory apartment language to allow on a lot with a duplex and or triplex seems like a bit of an easier squeeze.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm looking at this and there's not, how much coverage is that thing really? I'm assuming it's not all that wide. And that how much of this lot's already covered? It looks like it's more than half.
I mean, I don't think either of those other buildings meet current code standards, right? You couldn't build those 2 right now, I don't think,
Probably
based
not.
Probably not.
on our standards. So, yeah, I think I would assume they have to stay within the footprint.
Right.
Yeah, 'cause
So-
the garage is too close to the building next door.
And I think then the back too is probably too close to the other
Probably,
property line.
I don't know what's above that. I see something circular or whatever, oval, or whatever.
That's a pool.
Okay, there we go.
So I could draft up something along the lines of allowing ADUs to be pertinent to triplexes, basically. that would probably, I mean, I would check with other, experts to see if they think that wording makes sense or is in line with state statute. And if it does, in theory, that could be an easy way out of this situation. But I think, and it might be a big bite to bite off, but if we were to imagine what zoning might look like to allow 2 buildings per lot, what would what would make sense? Keeping it, would you say 2 buildings per lot and go with what Burlington's doing, whereas 4, you can have up to 4 units per building? Or would it be like, well, let's keep within the 4 unit limit right now, but if you wanted to lay it out in a different way so that it's in 2 buildings, that's allowed. I would say, yeah, it's maybe a big thing to bite off, but it actually makes it a lot more practical for some of these properties to add more housing.
I totally agree. I just think that's like, we should get city council, like have a joint meeting for that. If we're gonna go that route, that's like,
Multiple buildings.
yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, that's a major change to development in the city, right? So like city council should be
So I just did some
behind it.
quick
We should
Google,
understand
and
there.
according to Fannie Mae, the affordable housing mortgager, ADUs, only 1 ADU is permitted on a part when they're talking about selling a unit and financing for affordability. Only 1 ADU is permitted on a parcel per primary dwelling unit. ADUs are not permitted with 2 to 4 unit dwellings.
So it doesn't work.
So according to Fannie Mae, they wouldn't be that wouldn't work as an ADU.
Yeah. So maybe the only solution.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for going the 2 building route. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
It creates more housing.
Yeah,
That's like what we want to do. It's just one of those things that's like,
At the end of the day, I want to make more housing as accessible as possible.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is a good case study because this is a good example of based on how the city has been built up. Like you're just going to see more and more of this type of question.
Right.
But yeah, I think that it's definitely, I agree that it's a question that we should involve council on and we should talk through, but this is a great opportunity to
Right.
kind of dive into now that we have these increased.
Because I'm sure this is not the only lot that's has this possibility.
No, I think we're going to see a lot of this.
I think we're going to see a lot of this. I mean, there's a lot of lots that are. This one looks like kind of next door. You know, the lady subdivided the property and has a right-of-way driveway across to the back lot. So how would this be different? You know, I'm going. Yeah, she's got the house in front, and she's got the house in back, and the driveway's going across. And I see that same configuration here, except that it's right now it's a garage and a carriage house.
So I think either ways, the city council is gonna have a role in this. In fact, it's ultimately city council's document. The planning commission just needs to come up with recommendations, and even recommendations could be like, well, there are multiple options to this. But I think it wouldn't be a waste of time to put together a draft of something that might be a lot to bite off if it's a conversation starter, and worse comes to worse, it gets scaled back. So if I think if the commission is open to it, I can explore some wording for something that I think it would be reasonable, but would be pushing it to allow more housing like this.
How would this be different if this was a single-family home that suddenly wanted to become a triplex by adding another section onto this house? How would that be different?
Still a singular building.
It's
Singular
still a
building.
singular building.
Right. There's actually a really if the building was closer to the main building, I would have actually suggested that
Connected.
Just connect.
connected
Yeah.
with a little roof and a little covered walkway and call it one structure, and they'd be fine. So in some ways, it is kind of stupid that's not, that there's a distinction that we say one, if it's touching, it's fine, but if it's not touching, it's not fine. But of course, there's like, it would lead to more housing, which is good and also could be controversial.
Okay, so, not that buildings haven't been moved. Okay, what would stop them from moving that back carriage house up front?
I think then it would be out of
Well,
cost.
okay, well, I mean, yes.
I think then you'd
But-
have to be into the updated code, and then you have all the
Okay,
step backs
so-
and things like that would apply.
So like that question I would have is if they took that one down and put instead of the two cars there or whatever, they would, if they put it that way and ask for a variance, by taking that building down, they wouldn't create any more built on or paved. I'm worried at this point in time with the amount of coverage they've already got. It looks to me, just ballparking, that they've got at least 50%, if not more.
But I don't
that
think
lot
they would be
coverage.
able to expand
They wouldn't
coverage.
be able to expand
Yeah, they
coverage.
can't expand coverage. They have to stay within the
Right,
existing
which
footprint.
is why I'm saying if that building got moved up to the driveway instead, you'd have a whole bunch of tandem driveway going on. Or they actually make that garage actually workable and had two spots. It's, how much have they explored in this? I
Well,
mean, it's,
I think there are a lot of things they could theoretically do to bend over backwards to fit within zoning regs that aren't really made for this. But every hoop that somebody is being asked to jump through, if it's not actually to the benefit of, like, if it's not in the public interest, it is just something that is preventing housing, in my opinion. And I think if it's acceptable for a building that is attached and is the same size, like, and there's like maybe there is no reason why it shouldn't, the answer wouldn't be the same if it was detached. So
I'm just saying, reconfigure where the buildings are. I mean, it's, yes, they could put, it's the.
I mean, the cost of that is a lot more costly to do that.
Well, okay, so you have the cost of, and if you rationalize it as to what is it going to cost to retrofit, and they're going to have to put in more coverage because that's grass lot up to that building, which means more than likely it's going to have sidewalk, if not another driveway up to it. Not everybody likes to drive across the grass when it's like 6 inches, 10 inches of snow.
I don't think you would have to put. I mean, you could put a walkway,
We're not
but you don't
trying
need to
solve
change
their
parking.
design problem right
Yeah.
now.
But-
We're trying to
but I'm
decide
trying-
whether or not.
But I'm trying to figure out how to have this reconfigures conform to our lot coverage allowance. And they will have to make decisions as to how that will go, because right now those are pretty stringent. We can move things and tell them they needed,
But I think what we're trying to decide right now is, which I think we may have just come to the conclusion that we're not going to classify it as an EDU, but we'd be okay saying that we can move forward with multiple buildings per
Yeah.
lot
Right.
that would allow for housing.
Yeah,
they would still, right, and they would
They
still
would
have to
still
fit
need to come
within-
into code. They would still
Right.
need to figure that out. But
Yeah.
right now, we're not trying to decide that for them right now. We're just trying to come up with, do
well,
we
I
allow
think
for-
talking to the council, if they are friendly toward having multiple buildings on the same lot. Because
we don't need
usually-
to solve this lot problem.
No, well, the other solution is that can they divide that lot?
Yeah.
That's what's usually happened in the past, is that the lots gets divided.
Yeah, I think Chris, you said it right as a conversation starter, and I'd like to see go for it, write your thing, and then we'll use that as like a conversation starter with council. But I would want to see it as not something that we just write and then hand off and they
Right.
do their own thing.
Yeah, and I think there are different ways you could. The planning commission could recommend something in a different way. You could recommend something and say, "This is we've really thought through all of this. This is all good. Just go for it."
Yeah.
Or you could say, "We've thought through most of it. Most of it, I think it was technical tweaks. There is one thing that should take a close, like, that deserves a closer look. We think it's a good idea, but you should take it. And I think that is a perfect way to move forward with big changes.
Yep. Great.
Now, the nicety is that 2 of the council members had been planning commissioners in the past. So they're in you can say the mindset.
All right. Moving on to member updates.
Mural grant, unfortunately, is not moving forward with the way I proposed it last month. Way ambitious in trying to get that thing written in a week, and it just didn't happen. But I did meet with the homeowner, and he was overly enthusiastic about something being done with that concrete, a mural of some sort or any kind of public art being placed on it. So I'm exploring other avenues of potential funding to see if we can't move forward with it in some fashion, or we just wait 10 months and start writing our piece then, and give ourselves 2 months as opposed to 1 week.
Great.
To write it.
Thanks for exploring that.
Yeah. So, sorry, it didn't come to fruition. I'm pretty disappointed that I wasn't able to do it. But I will. One thing I didn't mention to you is in talking to him, when he purchased the property about whatever it was 10, 12 years ago or something, he said he thought the town owned the wall. It was that's what his understanding is. He was impressed that the city even came to him to ask if we could do something with it.
The city doesn't know
either.
either.
Right. So
Yeah.
yeah. So that's where we're at with that.
There are a variety of towns that I've driven through in Vermont that have murals in the downtowns on walls.
Oh yeah, funded probably a lot of them through the Vermont Arts Council, which is what I was trying to do. But
Yeah, I'm
just
about to
not
say
through the-
some of them, if you knew what they were, maybe you could ask them how they accomplished it.
yeah, probably certainly could. I know the woman who runs the grant program, Vermont Arts Council. She said this would have been a perfect fit if we had gotten it in. I'll continue to explore other avenues.
Yeah, and to your point, like 10 months isn't that far away,
No,
So
No,
like
it
giving us
will-
time to prepare a
right.
good application.
Potentially could go faster, right?
Makes sense.
But that's the intent. It's just some kind of public art to welcome people along this gray concrete wall.
Still a great idea.
Yeah.
The one thing I thought about, like, with that wall, is that you actually can't see it very well because it's on a curve and it's on the inside of the curve. But maybe it's all we've got to work with. So,
At the moment, yeah. I mean, there's another concrete wall here, and then we talked about the large building behind Five Corners Beverage or something, because you can see it from the road, and maybe there's a mural or some sort of piece of art that can go up on that. But
Well, the last time we had a mural was actually at the train station. It was drawn by high school students.
yeah,
So I mean, that, people who come and visit us, we get the train, obviously see a whole bunch of stuff.
additional opportunities there too.
So
So we'll continue to explore opportunities there.
But when I drove in one day just to see if I could see it, the blank wall, I think if you had something on it, it would be visible.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be dominant, but it would still be
Still be
visible.
there.
Yeah, I notice it every day I drive by. I see it, there's nothing on it. So
Yeah, I have visions of what it could look like.
Yeah.
thank you for approaching the property.
All right. Vision and strategic planning update. Is
I got
Scott?
that there for you, Scott, even though
is there any update on that? Or
There's there's an online survey right now. Hopefully everybody's done it. The results, I'm not sure when they're closing it down. I thought it was 2 weeks they were gonna have it open. It might be a little bit longer. And I'm not sure when they're planning to address the council. I thought it was in April that they were gonna present to the council. But I'm not sure that's gonna happen this month.
I think, if I understand correctly, it's still supposed to be later in this month that they
Yeah.
address the council.
Yeah. So that would be a presentation of everything to date.
Right.
Yeah.
And then as a separate phase, there'll be work with staff and council on prioritizing the action items out of that.
it would be nice if we could be involved in that,
I will. Well,
since we're responsible for the comprehensive plan.
right. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it depends what level, because there might be decisions there like whether or not to really try hard to resurrect the housing commission, things like that. I mean, it might be that might be something that needs to be decided at the council level, and maybe with input from staff. I don't know, but this. I mean,
No,
you're
I understand. There are certain decisions that have to be made by council.
right.
But there are obviously priorities there are things within the 6 pillars that may be dropped because we're not involved in the discussion. And I'd like to see at least aligned with the current comprehensive plan.
I will
Just,
try to bring that up, and you may also have a chance to bring that up at the the next like steering committee meeting.
okay.
All right.
I have another member update. I was recently appointed to the Vermont Climate Council's subcommittee on rural resilience and adaptation. So I have a list of all the members. There are 15 members plus staff. And there's a good representation from people from green housing organizations, also from Vermont or Green Mountain Power and other energy sort of weatherization programs like HEAT, which is in the Northeast Kingdom. So I'll make sure that if there's anything relevant coming out of that, then I'll report back to the Planning Commission. I think one of the reasons they wanted me on it is because I was representing or could represent municipal government to a certain extent.
Great. Staff updates.
Yeah, so you might have already heard, Jennifer Marble is no longer working here. We are looking for a new planner. If you know anyone that might be fit for the bill, send them my way.
Are you going to advertise for that then?
We've already been
It is
advertising.
advertised,
We're
yeah.
going to be
Okay.
interviewing actually the first round next week.
Nice. All right.
Best of luck.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I will give a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Motion